All right, so this is Essential Travel Logistics for Students. My name is Jake Kelzer, and I work at the International Center. And I'll let my two student colleagues introduce themselves next.
Thanks, Jake. Hi, everyone. My name's Shaylin. I'm a graduate peer advisor at the International Center. So I'm a graduate student here at the university, here to help out.
And I'm Robbie. I'm an undergraduate peer advisor. So I'm going to be graduating this semester, but here to help out too.
Awesome. And Shaylin and Robbie will both be sharing their personal experiences traveling as students as well. So you'll hear about that later. But I'll turn it back over to Shaylin.
Perfect. Yeah, so like Jake said, today we're going to talk a lot about the logistics of traveling abroad. So I'm assuming all of you are planning to go abroad sometime this summer, sometime soon. So just to go over what we'll cover in this presentation, we're going to start with a chance to do some introductions and learn more about where you're all going. And then we're going to go a little bit into like what you need to know before you go. So talk a little bit about visas, finances, cell phones, that kind of thing. Then we're going to get into a little bit about health and safety abroad, some tips for trip planning, some advice on what to look for while you're abroad in terms of local transport, navigating different languages and cultures, ethical photography, and things like that. And then finally, like Jake said, Robbie and I are going to present a little bit about our own experiences abroad. So I worked in the Peace Corps in Rwanda for a little bit, and then I studied abroad in undergrad in both London and Barcelona. So happy to talk to anybody about my experiences doing that. So yeah, that'll be today's presentation. Next slide, Jake. Okay, perfect. So we're going to start with introductions. So if everybody just in the chat would like to write down where they're heading to, either like the summer or whenever, that'd be great. So you can put in just the location, and then if you're doing it through a specific program and you want to know if anybody else is going on that program too, feel free to do that. But just to kind of get an idea of where everyone's off to, so if we can make it a little bit more specific in our advice, that would be helpful. Ooh, cool. I see Japan, US and Canada. Ooh, Colombia. Very cool. So that's 3 different continents already. Paris, make that 4. Oh, that's awesome. In Kenya, wow. I love this. We're going all over.
Okay, dang.
That's awesome. Yeah, no one going to Australia or Antarctica. We can't hit them all. Okay. Well, thank you all for sharing. And if you see anybody going somewhere similar as you and you want to chat after, we encourage everyone to kind of make connections while we're doing this too. So yeah, we can get started with the rest of it.
All right, so yeah, as Shaylin mentioned, we'll talk about some considerations before you go, which is right now. So these are going to be things you're going to start wanting to think about now if you haven't already. So the first big one, and I will say, hopefully you have already been thinking about this, researching this, acting on this, but passports and visas. In a previous presentation, we went into more detail about this because it was in February, and that was kind of the ideal time to start thinking about if you need a passport, like a new passport or renewing your passport or need a visa. So hopefully you're on top of things, but just really briefly wanted to mention that if you do need a passport or need to renew your passport, the State Department estimates that it can take up to like 8 to 11 weeks. That will be, by now that would be well into the summer. So hopefully you're not in that situation, but just wanted to mention that. And even if you are in that situation, you can pay for expedited processing. I did actually communicate with a student today who said someone at USPS, the post office, mentioned that even expedited processing right now can take like 7 to 9 weeks, which is which I've never heard it be that long. It might be because of of an increase in volume of applications because a lot of people want to get their passports in for summer travel, or things might still be slower after recovering from the pandemic and how, mailing things out, it just has been slower in general. So just wanted to mention that as well. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. I renewed January 23rd and had it expedited and just received my passport last week. So that's about 3 months. Yeah, so that, okay, and yeah, Renardis, 2 months. So yeah, it seems like it is taking a bit longer than typically advised or advertised online. So yeah, that I guess confirms what's on the screen now. So as well as passports, we always say it's a good idea to assume that you will need a visa. I know for many locations for Americans, you can travel to different countries for under 90 days without a visa. That's not the case for all countries, so it's just a good idea wherever you're going, even if that's not your home base when you're going abroad, if you're traveling to another country, just exploring if there are any visas necessary. So we have an updated visas page that's included on the slides, or that a link is included, and it gives all different information, including information for international students, because many of our international students will need a visa to places like Europe or other places where Americans would not. So yeah, visa processing times can greatly vary depending on if it's a physical visa, depending on if it's a electronic an electronic visa. So yeah, make sure if you haven't looked into that already, make sure you're looking into that now. And then also just know that although the International Center does basic visa advising, we are by no means experts, and we're not authorized to give like definitive information about what kind of visa you need, how long processing time will take, things like that. So contacting the consulate or embassy of the destination country is always the best choice. It can take a while to hear back from them, so we do recommend calling when at all possible, but also be patient, just because they do receive a high volume of emails and calls. So just factor that in when figuring out getting a visa. And then I guess lastly, I'll just mention that in general, always a good idea to make copies, like physical copies, and or have a copy, like an electronic copy, accessible via email, maybe on your phone, of your passport and visa, a passport picture, your flight information, things like that, just in case. You never know, like if something will get stolen or if you'll lose something. Always nice to have backups just in case. All right, Shaylin.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about packing, just some general advice from my own experiences traveling. So something important, first of all, before you head out is to make sure you're aware of what your airline's dimensions are for your luggage. You want to make sure that if you're bringing a personal item, it's not larger than your personal item can be. Same with your carry-on, because a lot of airlines are pretty strict on this and will make you repack if you have to. And then also just in terms of checked luggage, always try to weigh it ahead of time if you're able to. I can't tell you how many friends I've had at the airport realize that they're like a pound or two over, and then they have to take things out and it becomes a huge hassle. So definitely, just if you haven't traveled before, this is something that's really important to if you forget it at home, or at least be able to find a shop that might have something similar to it. So if you're worried about packing too much clothing or not enough, this is something that like you can address when you get there. And then in terms of clothing, always make sure, especially if you think you're going to be walking around a lot, you want to wear comfortable shoes. So I always recommend bringing like a good pair of sneakers and then some nice dressier shoes if you're planning to go out a little bit. But like I really like the brand Clark's. I think they're really comfortable. So yeah, just comfortable shoes are a must. And then for a lot of you, you might be wanting to do some of the more like touristy attractions. And for a lot of cities, that includes some religious sites and like important cultural sites that might require for you to cover up certain parts of your body. So a lot of temples and mosques and churches might ask you to wear a cardigan or a jacket before you're entering. So if you have your shoulders showing, they won't let you in. So that's just something to be aware of too before you go out, is to make sure you know just kind of what the vibe is of the places you're planning to go so that you have appropriate clothing in order to do everything that you want to do. And then again, just on the clothing side, what you do pack should definitely be for layering. So if you're traveling during the summer, I know it's tempting to kind of just stick to shorts and t-shirts, but you'll want to account for just like any changes during the day in terms of like rain. If you're having dinner in a chilly restaurant, the same types of things you consider while you're here. So just some important things to keep in mind. And a little tip is that dressing like a local can really help you avoid some unwanted attention. So when you're abroad, a lot of people might notice that you're American right away by what you're wearing, which is a little inevitable, but you can do some research just to see like what the standard style is and try to dress like that while you're there if that's something you want. And then on the side of this PowerPoint, and I know that we're going to send it to you all too, but those are just a couple items that we really want to emphasize that you shouldn't forget in terms of making sure you have an adapter for your electronic devices so that you can charge your phone or your laptop. It's nice to have a quick dry towel just if you're rushing, and when you repack it, it's not going to be all damp in your suitcase. And then again, just the basics of like having an umbrella, bringing a small bag to carry around valuable item, leaving them behind in your accommodations. So if you're staying in a hostel, it might be nice to have a lock on your suitcase in case you don't want to leave anything in like a potentially public setting. So these are just kind of general advice to keep in mind while you're packing. And yeah, I think that kind of covers that side of things. But if you have any questions too, feel free to send them in the chat and we can address them as we go.
All right, thanks, Shaylin. So next, just want to talk a little bit about finances before you go. It's a good, it's a good rule of thumb to always have a little bit of cash on you at all times. So like getting the local currency in advance, just in case. Sometimes, you know, if you're taking a taxi from the airport to the city, maybe taxis will only accept cash, or maybe you'll be in a situation where you just like want something small, and maybe like there's these small like coffee shops or like street food places that will take cash only. So it's always a good idea to not assume that you can just use your card everywhere, and have some cash on you. And depending on where you go, that country or culture might be might use more cash than card or more card than cash. So just look up in advance to see what their preferred way of paying for things is. And you can do this by ordering cash ahead of time. We don't recommend, uh, if worst case scenario, you can get cash at the airport, but they have really bad conversion rates. So we recommend ordering some ahead of time. It's most common to do so at a bank. Most big banks like Chase and stuff like that will allow you to order cash in many different currencies ahead of time. I don't know if credit unions offer that, so that would be something to look up with your individual bank or credit union if that's what you use. There, I don't know how many of you are familiar with like the Metro Detroit area, but there is a local foreign currency exchange center in Birmingham, Michigan. Just in case your bank doesn't offer those services and you want cash, you can go to Birmingham and call in advance and order cash from them. So something else to consider there. So I think it's also a good idea to have some US cash on you just in case, if you need to, in wherever country you go, if you need to exchange to get some local currency, um, or if you need to use US cash in airport or stuff like that. It's not a bad idea to do that. And then if you do have an additional debit or credit card, it it is recommended to do that as well. I don't, so I will say that when I was a student, I didn't have a credit card, so I'm not sure. I'll admit, like I didn't, I like didn't get a cell phone until 8th grade or something like that. So maybe credit cards are way more common for students nowadays, and you get them earlier. But if not, definitely have a debit card. And if you are comfortable with credit cards, you can explore options to get a one with no foreign transaction fees. Sorry, I did see there's usually ATMs at the airport that are much better than those at the money counter. Yeah, that's a good point that you can use ATMs as well. Just note when taking out of an ATM, depending on your bank and depending on the ATM you use, you can get charged a fee. So let's say your bank is like every time you use an ATM, there's a $5 or €5 or $5 worth of fee when you use it. That ATM might also charge a fee. Oh yeah, Charles Schwab is a good example of one that doesn't have any ATM fees. So yeah, Emmy, good call. So yeah, do some research ahead of time to see which cards do and do not have ATM fees. And just note that it's possible that depending on, regardless of what ATM fees your cards do or do not have, sometimes a local ATM that you use will still charge you, because that would be separate than whatever like fee your card or bank will do. But yeah, thanks, Emmy. Good call on Charles Schwab. Again, this used to be more common like a few years ago, where it was important to alert your bank when you're traveling to a different country. So if you're using cards or your account or anything like that, then they would know. I don't know if that's quite as common anymore where you need to. But if that's something that you're concerned about, like let's say you use your card and it gets flagged that it's in a different country and then they freeze your account or something like that, all you have to do is just call your bank, or maybe you can even alert them online that you'll be traveling to a new country. So one other thing to consider. Um, Something else that helps, especially if you're dealing with currency that is at a way different exchange rate than the US dollar, you can download a currency conversion app, and many of them operate offline as well. So you don't necessarily even need to have Wi-Fi or use data to check it out. But that might be a nice thing to use just to gauge how much things will cost. And then lastly, before you go, it's a great idea to come up with a budget, and I have an entire slide dedicated to that. So I'll get to that in a little bit. Next are cell phones. So there are a few different ways you can go about handling the cell phone situation when you go abroad. And if you are studying abroad through a program, your own study abroad program might have their own rules about how you need to handle a phone, whether like they require you to purchase one or like they allow you to bring your own, things like that. But one of the most common ways is to use your phone, your current US phone, and purchase a local SIM card abroad. Now, I recently learned that a lot of new phones already come unlocked. Like it used to be a thing maybe a few years back where you had to request to get your phone unlocked, and then you can use a SIM card from another country and have access to their plans. But the newer phones seem to automatically come unlocked. But I don't know exactly like if it's like iPhone 8 or earlier or whatnot, but it's like it's worth looking into to see if your phone is already unlocked. You can also buy a cell phone locally, like a flip phone, or even a some type of smartphone locally and use one of their plans. So that's something to think about as well. Renarda says you may want to check IMEI because not all phones are compatible with the local provider. I don't know what IMEI is, to be honest. Can you share what that means? Because this could be really good advice.
Oh, yeah. I just want to let you know. I just want to let other know that yeah, IMEI is like a probably like identity of that specific device. And for example, I'm an international student, right? So before I came here, before deciding which device that I will buy, I check on let's say on T-Mobile website, there's an IMEI checker to check if it's compatible or not. But if you got the device already and you're going abroad, you may want to check the local providers IMEI checker.
Cool. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's really good advice and kind of
Sure.
reinforces that make sure you're researching in advance and don't automatically assume that
True.
your phone can be used everywhere.
Because yeah, it is real. Some people have to buy another device because the IMEI is not compatible. So yeah.
Well, thank you.
No problem.
All right. And then there is an option, and this might be more of a good option for those who are doing short-term travel. I don't know if like all of you are studying or interning, or if any of you are just doing, like a couple week travel abroad. If you're doing, the latter, just traveling for a little bit of time, there is an option to explore what an international plan through your US provider might cost. I have Verizon, so I know that's $10 a day to use your phone internationally in many different countries, but that can really add up. So it's not something that if you're studying abroad for 3 months, you don't want to pay $10 every single day. So just know that could potentially be an option. In addition, the next point might be better for those who are traveling more short term, but in some cases, maybe it's not even necessary to have access to some type of data plan, and you can just get by with using Wi-Fi when traveling abroad. And in a lot of cities or cafes or restaurants and wherever you're staying, you should have access to Wi-Fi. But again, research in advance, because if you're going to a more remote area, then you can't always guarantee that you'll have Wi-Fi or that the Wi-Fi will be really strong. So yeah, just make sure you're looking in advance as to whether or not that could be a good option for you. And one nice thing is a lot of like the messaging apps, are accessible via Wi-Fi. And WhatsApp, GroupMe, iMessage, like these are just examples. There are many other different kinds of apps that different countries use and prefer. So again, look in advance. Also, if you're not going to have, even if you don't have Wi-Fi access, but if you don't have like a data plan or anything like that either, one cool feature that Google Maps offers is an offline map. And these three images kind of give an example. I know it says San Francisco Bay Area, but just imagine that this is an international destination. And let's say you're going to Tokyo, for example. You can search Tokyo on Google Maps, and then you can download an offline map of the city. So then once you get there, let's say you fly there, you get off at the airport, you connect to Wi-Fi at the airport, then it locks in your location. And since you downloaded a map, then you have access to the map of Tokyo, even when you don't, even when you're offline and don't have access to Wi-Fi. I use it all the time. It's really, really helpful. There might be other countries that have apps that offer the same function besides Google Maps. So you can look into that as well. But just know that can be a way to get like it can be a good way to navigate the city and not have to like pay for data and stuff like that. So something else to consider. All right, and then I'm just going to briefly go over some health and safety considerations because at the bottom you can see here that we did have a staying safe and healthy while abroad presentation a few weeks back. So if you attended that, you'll hear a lot of the same things, but just in case you didn't, I want to highlight a couple of the top considerations. First of all, there is U of M provides travel abroad health insurance through GeoBlue. And it's it's $1.57 a day. So it's very affordable if you're not going to have any international travel health insurance coverage. And just know that your US, it's likely that your US health insurance will not have international coverage. So don't bank on that. If you are going through a program, like a study abroad program through U of M or a different provider, health insurance may be covered, so you don't need to double insure yourself. But just in case you don't have that coverage, highly recommended, especially even if it's for leisure travel. Unfortunately, there was a situation over spring break where a couple students who were traveling in Mexico got in a car crash and had a really, really high medical bill because they didn't have international travel health insurance. So it's worth the $1.57 a day for that peace of mind. There's a question. I'm using Blue Care Network. Do I need to buy another insurance while going to Canada as an international student? So I would make sure with your specific plan, but I'm under the understanding that outside of the US, you're like Blue Care, like your US healthcare plan will not. Okay, Kelly says no, U of M international health insurance is worldwide. Wait, oh, okay. So you have the international student plan. Okay, yeah, thanks for clarifying, Kelly. I was not aware of that. So yeah, you're good. Okay. Next is if you're going to somewhere where you'll need vaccines or medications, there is the UHS Travel Health Clinic. Appointments book very, very quickly. So we do recommend scheduling 6 to 8 weeks before departure. So for many of you that you might be leaving before then, so hopefully you're on top of that. But if you're leaving later, or if you do need an appointment, schedule ASAP. They offer many different vaccinations, medication recommendations for prescription or over-the-counter medications. So they're a very, very valuable resource. You can learn more when you click on the link if that's something that you need. It's also a good idea to look at the travel designations, if there are any travel warnings or restrictions to the locations where you'll be traveling to, just so you're aware. And then we always recommend that you register your travel. If you go like through the university, if you go through a university managed program, like a study abroad program through U of M, you're automatically you will automatically need to register your travel. It's mandatory. It's optional for other travelers, but we highly, highly, highly recommend it just so we know where you are and can reach out to you in case anything comes up. And then similarly, the State Department has a kind of like a travel registry program. It's called STEP, or Smart Travel Enrollment Program. So you can also register with the US State Department too.
I'm gonna hop in here. That State Department one is super helpful if you sign up for it, because like last year I was in Copenhagen and they actually sent me an email that there was a protest going on in like one of the streets I was going down, and like generally as a traveler you want to avoid protests. So like it was super nice that they keep in contact with you and give you like updated information on what's going on in your country. So I'd say sign up for that if you can.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Robbie. That's a great point. And then just to finish, the right side of the screen has just some sample things you can bring with you on your trip. Of course, some might be more relevant to certain locations around the world, and others might not be quite as relevant, but just some things to think about as you put together maybe a first aid kit in case something happens while abroad.
And I'm just gonna hop in here, Jake, real quick, too, is make sure you verify what you're bringing is legal in the country that you're going to. So I meant to say this during packing also. So for example, Adderall is not legal in Japan. So for those of you traveling to Tokyo this summer, leave your Adderall at home if you have a prescription. And yeah, so just you can verify what is legal where by doing a quick Google search, and it should be able to tell you. The State Department has some good resources to clarify on that. So just make sure you're only bringing legal things.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Shaylin. And yeah, for those who are going to Japan, and if you do plan on bringing any medications, I would just double check with all of them just in case. All right, now we're to the trip planning portion. So I'll turn it over to Robbie.
Yeah, so I'll talk about some transportation tips. So this first slide is about just generally getting there. We have a whole booking international flights on a budget presentation that we just did a couple weeks ago. So there's a link down there that you can find later and check out that presentation. But overall, you want to be using search engines to find your flight, like Google Flights. There's also Skyscanner and the others, and those are just helpful in like finding what's cheap and what's going where you want to go. And you can, Google Flights is super helpful because it you can filter and like just choose when you're leaving and where you're going, and it'll find like which dates, like which range of dates are cheapest. There's also websites for discounted student tickets like Student Universe. There's Scott's Cheap Flights, which I think is now called Going, which is just kind of like a newsletter they send out. And they have like cheap flights across the globe. And also you could try doing a stopover to get extra time in a place of interest. So like if you're flying through Iceland to Europe, you could have a stopover in Iceland and check out Iceland for a couple days, usually at no extra cost. So some things to think about when making your big international flight is end destination. Will you need to catch a taxi? Is there accommodation? Some programs will accommodate you when you land, some won't. So that's good to know. Also, travel warnings or strikes. There were some big strikes in Europe last summer that were good to know about, especially like I went through the Amsterdam airport and waited like 5 hours in line because of a strike. So it's always good to know where you're going, what's going on. Also for luggage, no restrictions. If you're flying a very long flight, you don't want to lose your big bag because it's too big or something like that. So again, double check the size and the weight. And then also you want to be thinking about your time of departure and arrival. Is the area safe? And also just timing. So depending on when you land, you know, like train station, it's not flight, but train stations in Europe are often crowded with pickpockets. So that's good to know, especially if you're coming off an international flight. You're probably pretty like, you know, it's very jarring to get off a very long haul flight into a new country. So it's often good to be aware of what you'll be faced with. And also arriving late into the night, sometimes depending on which area you're in, it's not the safest. Just to be aware of, not to like be scared or anything, just to know and keep your eyes open. So yeah, next slide. So in between like a single country, trains are a good option. In that's big in Europe, and I'm sure other parts of the world do it too. Like Japan has a very good train infrastructure. So each country's railway system works differently. So we recommend that before you go, you take a look at what's available in the area where you would, you know, want to be going within the country, and you know what kind of transportation options are available. For multi-country trains, like EU Rail is pretty big. It can be expensive. So sometimes booking directly through like a country's train website is the best option, but it does have a lot of flexibility. Like there's a couple types of passes down there that give you like 5+ countries, and you know, it goes all throughout Europe, which is really nice. And anyway, so it's expensive but flexible. So it's good to know, just do your research beforehand and find out, you know, what type of train they have, you know, where they go and what are the popular routes, and also how much they cost. Sometimes they can be a lot of money. So yeah, next slide.
I'll just add something real quick about train transportation. If you are taking a train between that's crossing borders, so like a train from one country to another or something like that, I always found it was a good idea to look at both that country's uh, like train company website just to see if the price difference, if there was a price difference. For example, I was going from Germany, like Berlin, to Czech Republic in Prague, and Germany's train system, the Deutsche Bahn, was more expensive than the Czech Republic's train company. So I actually booked the exact same train through the Czech Republic's company to save a little bit of money. So you can also consider that too when searching for train transport between countries.
Yeah, and then a little more on transportation here. Buses and metro, tram, city buses are also popular depending on where you're at. They buses usually take the most time, but they're usually the cheapest option. Here's a couple examples. Flixbus, I think, is the UK. But anyways, each country has their own bus system, so it's again doing the research beforehand. You want to know the directions you plan to take ahead of time so you can plan out your route. Another thing with buses is finding the right spot. So where the bus stop is, going the right way, like you're on the right side of the street and taking the correctly numbered bus. So make sure you plan ahead with that. And so you're not like standing across the street when your bus leaves on the other side. So just make sure that you do the research beforehand and you should be fine. And then so for metros, trams, city buses, those are like intercity. So they have options for buying passes. Typically, like the longer the pass, the more money you're saving. So make sure that you take a look at that. That's really helpful to have, so you're not just like buying a ticket every time you go on the metro. And some countries also require validating a ticket, so make sure you know about that as well. Yeah, so we'll touch on lodging here too. So Hostel World, hostels are great. Hostel World is a good site to find and book hostels. They're inexpensive, usually in a good location. Like last year I was in Scotland, Edinburgh, and our hostel was right next to the big castle, the big Hogwarts castle. So it was great for being downtown. And yeah, they're usually fun or full of young travelers. They have kitchens. Sometimes they can, because there's such a public space, you have to worry about privacy and security. You're going to be usually in a big room full of people you don't know, which is fun, but also, you don't know them. So keep your wits about you. And like there's different room options. You can get private rooms or dorm style rooms. They're a great option overall for meeting other like-minded travelers. You can meet people to like go explore with. You can travel on a budget because the rooms are shared between so many people. And like I said before, you're staying in the city center without paying hundreds of dollars. And before, privacy may be limited. They're often noisy, travelers come and go. So it's just kind of something to know that, but it's kind of like a pro and con situation, what you would prefer. Also with Hostel World is nice, just it gives you reviews so you can do some research about what the hostel provides for people staying there. They sometimes offer something like free Wi-Fi, a meal, a locker, towel, but sometimes not. So it's always good to know what you're walking into. And yeah, so also like apparently some are above noisy places, so the reviews will tell you everything. And another thing to think about is book early. Popular hostels go fast. For this summer, I'm traveling in Europe with friends. We found that a lot of the popular hostels are already booked, like not like fully booked, but the bookings go fast. So it's good to know, earlier than later. Yeah, so I think that's it for hostels. Next slide. So hotels are also a good option. There's budget hotels and luxurious hotels, just whatever you have the budget for. You can use booking.com is a good example for finding hotels. So they're safer and more private than hostels, and breakfast is sometimes included. You can also read reviews on these too. You can also stay with locals through like Airbnb, or you can do couch surfing, which is staying on locals' couches for free. It's a great way for meeting other travelers and locals, and they do have a vetting system for the locals that you'll be staying with. Yeah, so let's see. I think that was pretty much everything for that. Yeah.
Okay, and I alluded to this a few slides ago, but just wanted to dedicate a slide to budgeting as well, because that's a huge component to traveling. So on the right side of the screen, you'll see this travel budget worksheet. It's just one that I found online. You can Google many different options, but I thought this like visually looked nice, and you can just basically write down all of your expenses, what your total budget is, and just figure out how much money you have to work with. But in general, when you're traveling, the big things to consider are transportation costs, lodging, food, and entertainment. As Robbie said with lodging, but this is also true for transportation and entertainment. You can save money by booking in advance. I know for some of us, it's nice to just do kind of like a just kind of like travel on the go and not have anything planned. But sometimes that can come with things being more costly. So you'll just have to determine if you want more flexible travel or more planned travel, and the cost differences of that. I also think that it would be a good idea to factor in something called like, I don't know, like incidentals into your budget, because whenever you travel, not everything's going to go perfectly. Something will happen. Maybe like you meet some people and you make this impromptu trip that you didn't plan or budget, or maybe you'll unfortunately lose money or get something stolen from you. Or maybe you'll buy a gift for someone that you weren't planning on just because like you thought it would, like they'd really like it. Like things like that come up when you travel. So it's probably a good idea to budget for that, just so that when it comes up, it doesn't, put you way over your budget. And it's also a good idea to just track your spending as you're traveling. I mean, I don't know if it's feasible to say you should be tracking every day, but maybe like once a week or once every few days or something like that. Just make sure you're on track with what your budget is, so you're not like way overspending. Then now we're into while you're abroad, and I want to continue talking about budgeting because I have just some general tips while you're abroad, of how to save money and kind of be on track for whatever your budget is. So first of all, when you're traveling, walking is such a great way to see the city. It's of course a good idea to make sure that you're researching the locations that are like where you're going to, and the specific neighborhoods if you're walking, to make sure that everywhere you're going is safe and stuff like that. Because for when you're walking, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're feeling uncomfortable or unsafe. But in general, walking is nice to see things that you maybe otherwise wouldn't see, as well as being free. So like in some cities, buses or metros, or like if you're taking transportation frequently, that can really add up. So walking, although it takes more time, it is a really fun way to get around at no cost. And then, a big initial cost when you get somewhere is like after a long international flight, a lot of people, it seems like they might just want to like take a taxi from the airport to where they're staying. And that's very understandable. But for those who are money conscious, just know that there are maybe other ways. There might be a train or a bus, like station, like a train station maybe connected to the airport, or a bus station right outside the airport, or these different types of like really cheap options that you can consider after landing in a city. So just do some research, look into it if you want to save some money. It can the difference between a taxi and like a bus from the airport to the city can be drastic. So think about that. Food, of course, is a big one. A lot of people travel because they want to try all these different types of food. They want to go sometimes to nice restaurants and stuff like that. But I personally really like street food and trying, like what the locals eat and how the locals eat cheap. So a lot of times I'll just Google best cheap food in X country, and usually I'll get connected to like blogs or maybe through TripAdvisor or Google reviews, and just look around and see what a lot of people say is good and affordable. And many times, I have really positive food experiences. So yeah, so I guess it just takes a little bit of work to look in advance, but many times it can be worth it and save you money. And then if you are staying somewhere like in a budget hotel or in a hostel, sometimes maybe there will be access to like a small kitchen. So a huge way to eat cheap is to cook your own meals and not go out to eat all the time. So that's something you can consider as well. One thing that it seems kind of strange that I always pack with me is peanut butter. Well, I guess first of all, like I'm an American and peanut butter is very common here, but it's not as common elsewhere. So, but bread and jelly seem to be very common elsewhere. So I can just make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches if I'm traveling and want to eat cheap. It's a good way that I've used to save money quite a bit. I see Kelly made a comment about, yes, yeah, of course, you should be researching in advance if you're eating or drinking things in a country where maybe it's known, like you could get sick from eating street food or drinking tap water, things like that. So yeah, Travel Health Clinic is a great resource for that. Thanks, Kelly. And then lastly, for entertainment, some countries have museums, like museum hours that are free on designated days, maybe during holidays, or I know I've experienced living in Spain, and like they're big museums like the Prado or Reina Sofia. They have 2 hours during the week designated. Like it was like a Thursday from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. You could just go into the museum for free, and many times for me, like that was plenty of time to see as much of a museum as I wanted to. So that can be something to look into in advance to see things that are normally really expensive for free. And then again, I Google things a lot, so I'll just like look at best free things to do in like whatever city I'm going to. And yeah, many times they give good outdoors recommendations or other types of free things inside that you can do. So that's an option. And then of course, it's always a good idea to ask locals what their recommendations are. They are not tourists, so they're probably not as likely to spend as much money as tourists would. So they might know of like good cheap options to do things for free and eat things for free and stuff like that. Okay, I'll go through this pretty quickly because next week we have a survival language and culture session, which will go into this in much greater detail. But in general, it's a great idea when you're going to a new place to learn some very general phrases like where's the bathroom, where's the bus stop, how much does this cost, things like that. Locals really appreciate when you try and ask things in their own language, so you shouldn't automatically assume that everyone will know English. And depending on where you are, if you're in a city or more like the country or rural area, they might have different dialects or accents, so it could be more challenging. So again, this seems like a recurring theme, but just make sure you're researching in advance where you're going, and that will go a long way. We also list some resources, the Language Resource Center, Google Translate, which you can download. You can download offline like languages, and it can translate without having access to Wi-Fi or data. And also with Google Translate, and I'm sure there are other apps where you can have access to a camera, and then you can like show your phone's camera on another language, and it can translate for you. So different tips like that can go a long way. You know, just some general cultural norms or cultural considerations would be that, you know, many cultures have different concepts of time and space than is here in the United States. So just know that ahead of time. There might be different general or gender expectations or general gender norms in countries. Um, there is likely going to be a different type of drinking culture. And just know that, yeah, generally speaking, like the American university drinking culture is not common in other countries around the world. So just be careful if you do decide to drink and are of age. And then also you might be traveling at a time where there are local holidays, which could either make things really, really busy or make things not busy at all. And like certain like governmental buildings might be closed and stuff like that. So yeah, just be aware of when you are traveling as well. And if you all are doing any internships, then make sure you're looking in advance of different like workplace culture considerations, and see what type of behavior is appropriate in the workplace in that country, both like cultural behavior and how you're dressing as well. All right, I'll send it back to Shaylin now.
Awesome. And I know that we're really cutting it close on time, so I'm just going to go quickly through these. And again, you'll have the slides. But just something to keep in mind is avoiding pickpockets. So when I was 19 studying abroad in Barcelona, I tragically had both my phone and wallet stolen on different occasions while I was abroad. And it really put a damper. It was my first week of being abroad really ever in my life. And so I just really want everyone to take into consideration safety, making sure that you stay with friends, making sure that if you have a zipper, having it closed either on your purse or on your jacket, that kind of thing. Yeah, just lived experience with this, and it sucks when you're abroad and this happens to you. So do the basics of what you do anywhere and just keep it in mind, because you never know what could happen. And then Jake, we can just move on to the next one too. A lot of that information is pretty like standard. So we also just wanted to highlight real quick ethical photography while you're abroad. Again, we're going to be having a presentation on exploring culture and respectful community engagement in a couple weeks, and I really recommend that you attend that session. But just no matter where you are, taking pictures of a stranger without their consent is just never really okay. It's harder when you're at a classic touristy space, but definitely keep in mind like the reasons why you're taking pictures. Is it appropriate? Are other people taking pictures in the area too? What message are you sending with that picture, especially for those of you going to an area that might like have a more vulnerable population? Definitely just take into consideration what you're taking a picture of while you're there. And again, not a lot of time, so that's kind of just the highlighting on that. So Jake's going to do real quick on social identities next.
Yeah, just wanted to share a few different resources and the first is through U of M. It's our Identities Abroad website, and it just gives a lot of useful resources and information for our students who have many different identities, such as students with disabilities, international students abroad, race and ethnicity abroad, and more. So one resource that we share actually that I wanted to highlight is called EqualDex, and it shares how the LGBTQ rights across various countries around the world are. So this is a really good resource. It seems like it's maybe the go-to resource for that. So that's linked as well. And then there is an external organization called Diversity Abroad that you can look into as well. And then I won't get into perceptions of Americans abroad, except for the fact that just know that when you travel abroad, there will be people from that country that have an idea of what Americans are, whether that's from personal experiences or what they've seen in the media. But you might get stereotyped for various reasons. So just know that that could be a possibility coming in, and be prepared to maybe have some conversations. And it could be a great opportunity for you to share with others about your experience and how it might be different from what they thought, as well as, you know, how they can teach you about themselves and their culture. Okay, so we're at about time, but really quickly, Shaylin and Robbie, if you want to share a little bit about your experiences abroad, you can go ahead and do that, and then we'll get to the Q&A.
Okay, yeah. So last summer I got the opportunity to study abroad in Denmark. This was through U of M. It was through engineering. Basically, it was an internship and a study abroad program. So we got like placed with a local startup in Denmark, which got us to see a lot of the city, interact with locals. Based off of what we said, like a lot of what we mentioned was things that U of M told us about before. So like we didn't need to worry about visas because that's included if you're American. And packing wise, you know, most of that, what I ran into in Denmark was that it was a lot colder than I thought. So I actually was wearing like one sweatshirt the whole summer because I only brought one sweatshirt. So definitely check your climate. But yeah, so anyways, I found that it was really fun exploring the whole city, doing things cheaply, walking. We actually got to do a lot of bike riding because Denmark or Copenhagen itself is a big bike city. So they provided us bikes as our transportation. We just went around on those. So definitely take advantage of like what the transportation is in your local area, if you're comfortable with it, of course. I think it's a great way to see the city like a local is just travel the way they would. And then also through this program, we got to do like a study tour through Stockholm, Sweden, and Helsinki, Finland, and that was a lot of fun. Just more seeing new startups and with our classmates from U of M, but also from other universities in the United States. Probably the best part about the program was that we were in housed with Danish students, so we got to just interact with locals, you know, every single day. So I would definitely recommend trying to go to places locals go and like interact with them over like, you know, your American students. Like they're great, but also you're only abroad for so long, you know, so definitely take advantage of the local culture that you're in and learn about it when you can. But yeah.
Awesome. And then, yeah, just real quick, in case anyone needs to ask questions about these experiences, I studied abroad for a semester in London and did some traveling throughout the UK while I was there. And then I did a month a month program during the summer in Barcelona when I was an undergrad for intensive language instruction, where I lived with a host family. It was an 87-year-old woman who lived alone in an apartment. So I can talk about just like the experience of living with a host mother and just how great that was for me. And then again, I taught English in Rwanda through the Peace Corps, where again, I lived with a host family for 3 months, and then I lived on my own, but like really closely with my co-teacher for another 3 months before COVID hit and I was sent home. But basically, my biggest takeaway is I really recommend living with a host family if you have the ability to. It was personally like great for me in terms of language learning and in terms of just getting that more cultural experience that I didn't necessarily get in London, where I was living with just other students from my university. That was by far the time that I made the least new friends, versus in Barcelona and Rwanda, I am still in contact with a lot of different people from all over the world that I met because I wasn't living with only Americans. Yeah, so that's just highlighting that. We don't have time to get into it, but we're going to move on to questions now. So if you have any specific questions and you want to hang on the line, I think we're willing to stay for a little bit and just kind of address like need to know things. Yeah.
Definitely. And I do want to mention that us three might not be experts in every region or the specific regions that you're going to. So if you do have any region specific questions that we're unable to answer, I wanted to direct you to the International Institute because they have various area studies centers like the Center for African Studies or Center for Japanese Studies or Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies. Different studies like that where they have staff who are maybe experienced in living or maybe even from the regions where you'll be going. So they're a very, very great resource. And then you can also consider reaching out to various language departments that are on campus as well. So do you have any questions?
And also feel free to email us too. So all of our emails are listed on there. The ROGR is Robbie's personal UMich email, and then mine is the Shaymac. So if, for example, you're going to a region one of us talked about and you want to just ask some specifics, we're happy to talk over email too. And we also offer advising appointments. So if you wanted to talk more one-on-one, we're happy to do that. But yeah, right now, feel free to raise your hand or send it in the chat. Or if you think you got everything you needed out of this for today, we'll follow up with sending you the PowerPoints and all these resources, and you can kind of head out. So yeah, thanks so much. Okay, can you elaborate on what Institute of International Studies in the previous page? So the International Institute on campus is just another department on campus that kind of has centers for different regions around the world. So it's a lot of professors and researchers. For example, there's the Center for Chinese Studies, and those are experts who study China and the Chinese language. And you can reach out to them to kind of talk about their expertise. And they have program-specific scholarships if you're going to a region that is under their field of study. So definitely, if that's something you're interested in looking into, the International Institute has a lot of resources. And yeah, anything else you want to add on to that, Jake? I know they have like scholarship opportunities and things like that.
Yeah, I think that covers it really well. In some, the International Institute is more of an academic focused office, where the International Center is more of a student services office.
Mm-hmm.
So International Institute will, have faculty who are experts in the specific region, or maybe even invite visiting faculty from that region to study or present at University of Michigan.
Perfect. And then next question from Annabelle, we had, will the survival language and culture session be language specific? So that one is going to be just more broadly about going abroad in an area where it might be a language you don't speak or a language you're studying. So it's not specific towards like Spanish or French or like Kenya, Rwanda or something, but just more broadly using language abroad. And that's also whether or not you're like going there to learn a language. It's a lot of like recommendations on, for example, if you're traveling to Germany and you're not really studying German, but you want to know just the survival specifics around like, how do I order coffee and how do I ask where the hospital is, which hopefully you don't have to use, but I do recommend you know how to ask. Perfect. Yeah, then Kelly said it'll also showcase resources offered through the Language Resource Center. So yeah, they're doing that presentation with us and they're going to take over a lot of the language side of things. And then I'll be there too. So you can see my beautiful face again, talking about the cultural side of things. But great question. Anything else that we can help you all with right now? You're welcome.